Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to introduce you tonight to a really interesting young lady. Her name is Beth Sturdevant. She is a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and an inspiring entrepreneur who, through navigating the adversities of her own life's journey and healing her inner warrior spirit, has found authentic purpose and joy in her life again and made it her mission to help others do the same. Beth, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So what's your inner warrior spirit?
The inner warrior spirit is the heart of who you are, right? It's that part of you that really helps you get through life and adversity and kind of keep you back, bring you back, we'll say, to that inner compass, that purpose, and is directing you in life, essentially. And we all have it. It's just often we're disconnected from it. It becomes wounded, or we don't even have access to it for a variety of reasons. So,
you said that you had your own challenges, your own healing that needed to be done. Why is healing important, and how did you heal?
Healing, the word healing, I find in my line of work, can be very triggering for people. You know, egoically, we want to believe that we don't need to be healed. There's nothing wrong with us. But from a shamanic perspective and a spiritual healer's perspective and understanding, we're very layered. There's many components that make us who we are today. And especially in the early stages of life, up until the age of 21, that's when we're really formed, kind of our nuances and our habits, good or bad. And for myself, growing up, I had a very wonderful childhood, great parents, but I was kind of very impressionistic and we'll say kind of taken off my path as to who I was, to knowing my authentic self, we'll say being my authentic self. And I'm going to attribute a lot of that to the modern day school systems and the labeling and the psychoeducational assessments and making children feel like there's something wrong with them if they don't think or know everything the way that the school systems believe that they should. And so being labeled and tested, all these different things kind of made me feel different and not in a good way and incapable. And so it really kind of, I was like,
why different? Because you were into shamanism or something, or what?
No, I was very passionate and I was full of fire and life. And you don't think that, and that doesn't really fit into the school system where you sit down and you got it, math is math and, French and all these things that are deemed important, and they are important, but that doesn't mean that we all learn them in the same way or at the same pace. And so when you're kind of not at the same level or stage as where they think you should be, then, look, I'm also, I have a degree in education, right? So I understand the hardships of teachers and the education system of trying to offer free education to, millions of children and the importance of that. But it's really hard to fit people into that box. And so for me, I didn't fit in that box. And so when I got tested, we'll say, I didn't realize I was different. I didn't think I had a learning disability. I didn't think I was, there was anything quote unquote wrong. So at that point, that was a pivotal moment where I was like, oh, okay, I'm not normal. What's wrong with me? And through that kind of need to identify, which is what we do in that period of time, especially in the early adolescence, we're trying to discover who we are. Both my parents are professional classical musicians. And so they heavily were influencing me in classical music. And that was easy. That was an easy avenue because it was like, okay, I don't need to do math. I don't need to learn all these things. I can just play cello. That's easy. So I kind of went down that path as a musician, not because my heart called out to it, not because my soul was like, oh my God, music, I love the cello. But because it was like, there wasn't anything else to do that I felt I could do. Right. So I went down that path as a classical musician, and I'm very grateful for my experiences in it. But along the way, I didn't know who I was. Again, you're searching for that identity. And so I started practicing some really poor habits and abusing alcohol and things like that, that were, we're trying to find that part of ourselves. Oh, is this me? Okay, if that's not me, I've got to change, right? I like the idea of this person, but I'm not that person. So let's use alcohol or drugs to become that person, or whatever it is. And so we start to develop these unhealthy habits to kind of find that authenticity that we were lacking inside. So I went through university, again, wonderful experiences, lived all over the States, lived in Europe, until I got to the point where I was living in New York City and playing on Broadway and touring with Barbra Streisand. Again, wonderful things.
Playing the cello?
Playing cello, yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't authentic. And so there was that void inside of me that I couldn't fill. Like, I didn't know who I was. So at the time, I was engaged, and we were pregnant. And then my fiance at the time left me, and just the circumstances and not really having the confidence in myself to be a full-time single mother in New York City as a freelance cellist without support. I just couldn't understand how I could do it. So I moved back to Ottawa to be close to my family. And that period of time when I moved back and really having to dig deep and find myself, like, really, who is Beth? Okay, well, I'm not doing my music career. I don't have Broadway. I don't have those things here. I was still doing music here, but it's different. I was teaching music. Again, my heart wasn't really in it. So I was looking for other ways to fill that, whatever was lacking, I felt lacking inside of myself. And so through that journey of really trying to find myself, I did, years and years of traditional therapy. I was put on medication because, well, clearly, you don't feel good, you're depressed, you got to go, oh, well, okay, let's try this medicine. You're just looking for ways to feel better, right? None of it worked long-term. And it wasn't until I discovered the shamanism that it changed everything. It really changed everything. It was kind of this light that I needed, and that actualized hope, right? Because throughout our lives, we're talking, oh, I hope this is happening. I hope I can do this. I hope I can do that. Well, hope without action is just suffering, continuous, cycles of suffering. So shamanism for me and spiritual healing, through the experience of it and healing all of those parts that I lost or had become wounded along the way, really brought me back to the center, back to that inner compass, back to the soul of who I am and my purpose that I didn't even realize wasn't there to begin with. So
what a fascinating story and a fascinating journey. And it's wonderful that you've come out of that journey so positive. We're going to take a break and come back more with Beth in just a minute. Stay with us. We're going to be back in about 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Beth Sturdevant. She is a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and an aspiring entrepreneur who, through navigating the adversities of her own life's journey and healing her inner warrior spirit, has found authentic purpose and joy in her life again and made it her mission to help others to do the same. And so I thought that, today, being sort of that day of rebirth, would be great to check in with Beth and find out a little bit more about her journey. She shared a little bit of her journey with us in the first segment. And now I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about shamanism and spiritual healing and what is shamanism and why shamanism was so helpful to you.
Great question. So shamanism is actually the oldest, call it therapeutic healing practice. It's shamanism itself is earth-based healing, essentially. And it's a genre in the spectrum of healing. It essentially examines and changes our non-conscious belief systems. So the parts of our mind and our subconscious mind that essentially drives everything we do, right? Everything we think, how we feel, how we act. And it was actually first applied in the ancient religions and the practices of the Turks and Mongols. And there is evidence that it was practiced dating back to the prehistoric Paleolithic eras as well. So really what shamanism does is it gets into the access of the parts of the hard drive, the subconscious mind, the 90% of our consciousness that we can't access. And it helps us basically, see what we can't see, know what we don't know, and also understand what we're expecting and how those expectations perhaps are affecting our lives. And then the quantum aspect of shamanism, which is what I do a lot and work with, is basically applied quantum physics. So what that means is through shamanism and applied quantum physics, we're dealing with time in the non-linear sense. So the past, the present, and the future are all happening in this exact moment. So when we have unresolved traumas or experiences or emotions in the past, they're still living and playing out in our minds, in our subconscious minds at 90% today. So those stories are continuously playing, which is why as we get older, life tends to feel more overwhelming. Things, we're just packing on more stories, more traumas, more adverse emotions. And then also we apply the observer effect in that how something is observed changes it. So we essentially bend reality in that how you're observing something is essentially you're taking it on, you're becoming it, right? So shamanism really is that kind of multidimensional, multi-layered form of healing when we're not just going in for information, we're not exploring, the root cause, we're healing it, resolving it, and changing it in the present moment and also into the future.
You're not going in and solving the root cause. You're healing it in the present moment. Explain that.
Well, we go and so I like to think of myself, and I tell my clients, you're doing the healing. I'm just your co-facilitator. We're working together, co-healing. So it's not a therapy session in that we're going to talk. We do talk a little bit sometimes, but the purpose of the talking is to get to the understanding of where the root cause of whatever's affecting you, or whatever issue comes up. And then using that to get to that place within your subconscious mind, or even in your energetic bodies, or in the, if you believe in past lives or genetics as well. So they all come into play. So we get a multidimensional understanding of what is actually affecting you and why you're feeling or thinking or doing what you're doing in the present moment. Then when we find it, that creates understanding and awareness in the person's consciousness, which brings about healing and change. Because then you have choices, right? Then you have the ability to think differently, feel differently, and most importantly, do differently.
And I apologize, I don't understand. Why is this shamanism? It sounds like it's therapy.
Well, therapy is talking.
Okay.
So the difference between shamanism and traditional therapy is that we don't just talk, we heal, we resolve. The purpose, if there is talking, is always for conscious understanding of what's in your subconscious mind. Think of it more like hypnosis, but hypnosis with healing. So we're not just going for understanding and awareness, we're taking one step further, and we're healing it and resolving.
So do you do hypnosis as well then?
It's not hypnosis, it's called trance.
Trance. What's trance?
Trance is just getting into a state in your body and your mind where you can access your subconscious mind. So some people use psychedelics. There's this movement where a lot of people will be guided on psychedelic journeys, which give them access to that network of information in your subconscious mind. But a professional shaman, a trained shaman in my field, we do that through trance, through guiding people on essentially visualizations and journeys to get that information, and then most importantly, to heal and resolve it. So we're not reliving anything. We're going solely for the purpose of gathering information and healing.
Really? So let's say that I hired you to do a session with me. Tell me sort of what would happen. We would sit and we would talk about my historical trauma or something, and then what would we do?
Well, I mean, again, if we talk about the fact that time is relative, your body, the moment you book a session and you've made a conscious choice to come and see me, your unconscious mind, everything you're already there. So we're already beginning to work. So things are going to start to come up. You might come to the session and be like, I don't know what to work on. And then but yet you're having emotions, right? Or a thought that you haven't thought about for a while is coming up, or an event happened that triggered you right before the session. So we'll examine whatever it is, or you can come with a specific problem
or question or issue.
Yeah. And then depending on what it is that you want help with, I can guide the conversation again and kind of tracking what we need to do. And then
are you doing this while I'm lying on a couch, or are we going for a walk in a field, or sitting in a coffee shop? What are we doing?
Well, I do it here in my healing office or online. We can do it literally anywhere, but because I'm dealing usually with people in a quite vulnerable space and state, it is a private experience that we definitely want to have that safe space where people feel like they can really let go, right? And feel what they need to feel.
Now, you said you're a trained shaman. Tell me, what type of training does a trained shaman need to do?
Well, I've trained over 6 years with an Algonquin shaman, an Algonquin medicine man, and he has a programs through his company called the Eighth Fire School of Shamanism. So that entails, many, many, many hours of learning, doing exchanges, practicing, and then, of course, then applying it in practicums. So I did that for 6 years. And then I'm also trained in quantum shamanic Reiki. I'm a master in that. And then I'm also a teaching assistant for one of his shaman programs. What
is quantum shaman Reiki?
Quantum shamanic Reiki is, Reiki, I don't know if you're familiar with Reiki, is a form of energy healing. And although Reiki itself has been around since time immemorial, the man who kind of rediscovered Reiki, his name is Usui Sensei. He was from Japan. He kind of was going through this kind of search of who am I? What's my purpose? Going through some life struggles, and he was instructed to go on a fast and do some meditation to really, face whatever darkness he was facing. And so on that journey, we'll call it that quest for enlightenment, while he was meditating and fasting, he basically tapped into this life force energy. So Reiki, essentially, think of Star Wars or the Matrix, right? Use the force. And I know it's a huge leap of faith, and I hope I'm very conscious of the woo-woo aspects of it, especially being the kind of, I grew up pretty agnostic myself. So I totally understand the apprehensions and doubts around it. So this man in 1922 connected to this force, this energy that's around us. So Reiki, Rei means spirit, Qi is Qi. So think of Tai Chi or Qigong. It's basically the energetic systems of our bodies. And so the combination of this is spiritual guided life force energy. So when he kind of reconnected with this and he realized the healing capacities of it, then he started to educate people. Where the quantum shamanic comes in is, again, we're using that life force energy we're talking about, like Star Wars used the Force, but we're applying the quantum physics to it. So the nonlinear time of our traumas, but also the observer effect. So if I'm looking at somebody, or even as myself, as broken or wounded, then I will continue to stay in that role, that identity. And so an example of that is myself, when I kind of got to a key moment in my life where I realized how unhealthy I was and how I didn't know myself. It was a dark place. You know, it was kind of this moment of do or die. Okay, Beth, you can't keep being who you were, but now you got to discover who you are. And so in so doing that, I had to shift my perspective and how I was viewing myself. So while I was on antidepressants, I never identified as being depressed. It was a temporary, I am not depressed. I am just exhibiting the signs of depression right now because of X, Y, Z. Or when I would abuse alcohol, I am not an alcoholic. I am using alcohol as a means, ... because of X, Y, Z. So it really is how you're identifying and how you're observing yourself and looking at yourself. It's not denying the effects that you're going through or how you feel, but it's holding the vision and the healed outcome of who you want to be. So that as you're continuing on this healing journey, you start to kind of peel away the layers of everything that you aren't, so that you can become everything that you are.
So you went through this trauma, and it sounds like it was some combination of your fiance leaving you as a single mom and having to go back to Ottawa, and not knowing who you were, given that you had historically been a professional celloist, and you were trying to figure out who you were, and is that when you then started the alcoholism and going on medication for depression?
That's a great question. Yeah.
And then,
no,
go ahead.
I actually abused alcohol since I was in high school. So that was, again, so part of shamanism is, again, you're going into parts of your non-conscious mind that you block, things that we don't even realize perhaps that happened, or the way that they've affected us. So through my healing journey, I realized things that happened to me. I remembered. So it's a process of remembering, essentially, not reliving, remembering. So I remembered being molested when I was a young child, and that kind of by a neighbor. And I completely blocked that out. However, the effects of all of that were continuing to create, adverse reactions in me and causing me to do things. And so through that, then I was in high school, I was anorexic as well. And then again, continued to abuse alcohol out throughout my college years. And, through that had pretty traumatic experiences. So it's kind of this like domino effect, but sometimes if you can't get to the root, you don't realize why and how, and you start piecing them together. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. So when my fiance at the time left me, that was just a piece of the pie. So it kept going, and I kept abusing alcohol when I moved back to Ottawa.
Did he leave you because of the alcohol, or because of the fear of the being a parent, or?
Yeah, it was for him. It was his own journey. We've completely reconciled, and we have a great co-parenting relationship. But at the time, he was going through his own stuff, and so no, it wasn't alcohol related. It wasn't to a point where I was a daily alcohol. I was a binge drinker. So, and then I had moments of clarity, or breaks from it and things like that. So I wouldn't say alcohol affected that relationship in any way. It was more the fact that the root of my alcoholism was the fact that I was so insecure, and that insecurity and that lack of strength within myself caused a lot of effects.
Why would someone like you be insecure? You're obviously, very articulate and very knowledgeable and attractive, charismatic. Why would someone like you be insecure?
Well, I think that the chicken before the egg, or the egg before the chicken. I mean, we all, again, if we go back to the root, if we go back to the fact that when I was a child, the school system basically made me feel like I was stupid, and then teachers reinforced that. and then being molested as a young age, and then, being awkward. Like, all these events affect us. And, people always say children are resilient. Sure we are. But at some point, what we experience has to resolve itself, or it's going to implode.
Okay, so you're back in Ottawa. You've gone through all this trauma. You're taking antidepressants and maybe binge drinking. What was the trigger? What caused you to heal yourself, find your authentic self, and try shamanism? How did you find that?
Well, again, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. The therapy, I'm reading self-help books, I'm, meditating. I'm trying to heal myself in ways that I knew. I met, we'll say, I don't like to use the term soulmate, because I believe that there's multiple soulmates out there, but the closest I've ever felt to a soulmate. And this connection ignited and awakened that inner warrior in me. So this man was he was a commanding officer in the Canadian Special Forces. So a real warrior in our traditional sense. And that made me realize it was like, again, it's a process of remembering, oh, that's who I am. This is who I am. But all of the effects, all of the things that had happened to me in the past were still playing out. Again, nonlinear time. They're still happening in my mind. So I would do things that would compromise our relationship. And what happens is, when we're insecure, we have these deep-rooted issues, we start to create these self-fulfilling prophecies. Oh, this guy's going to leave me. Of course he's going to leave me, in my subconscious mind. Why wouldn't he leave me? Everybody else has left me. So we start to create these scenarios. We start to act in ways that perhaps compromise who we are in our relationship. So I would do things like that. And the medical doc community, oh, well, your hormones, it's your PMS. No, it's actually that deep-rooted insecurity that I had that would come out every month. Because it's like, if you think of the tide, right? The cycles of the moon, in and out, in and out. When a woman goes through these cycles, it's like the tide going out, and all of a sudden all the issues come to the forefront and then they go away. So in this cycle, all my insecurities would come out, and I would do things that were really not true to my true nature, that inner warrior. And so eventually that led to the demise of our relationship. He had his own part, and I'm not going to dismiss that. I can only account for my own actions, right? So that breakup was the catalyst for change, because it made me realize, if I can cause or be a part of the cause of the demise of such a meaningful, purposeful, soulful love, then I don't know who I am. So that's when, through that, I discovered the shamanism. I'd heard about this Algonquin shaman, and it really made me dive deep and take the plunge.
What a fascinating story. We're chatting tonight with Beth Sturdevant, who is a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and aspiring entrepreneur. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Beth in 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Beth Sturdevant. She's got a fascinating background. She's a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and she's an aspiring entrepreneur. And we talked about her challenges, her adversities, some of the trauma that she's encountered, and she talked about finding her inner warrior spirit. And Beth, I wonder, I've seen these pictures of you on social media with a bow and arrow and doing things out in nature. Tell me a little bit about your inner warrior spirit. And I understand you started doing workshops on finding your inner warrior spirit. Tell us about that.
I did. So after that breakup and kind of discovering shamanism and spiritual healing, I got to that point again. That warrior was awakened, we'll say, when I met that ex who was in the military. But really it came to life in the reality, or the realization, I should say, that I am the only one that can save myself, comes when you really realize that you have to do the work to heal yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. You're the only one that can protect you. You're the only one that can heal yourself. And really, we're all on this journey, right? This hero's journey of self-discovery, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. So at the time, I realized the importance of really remembering that warrior, actualizing it within myself, because, you know, when you start to really unpack all of this, the realities of your life and what's brought you to where you are, and perhaps made the mistakes that you've made, it's hard. It's terrifying, right? So that inner warrior is that part of you that's going to continue to carry you through, that's going to kind of guide you up. You know, I call it slaying your inner dragons, or taming the inner dragons.
Do you think we all are inner warriors, or have inner warriors?
100%, 100%. So it's, again, it's this remembering. And so I decided to use my trainings in shamanism to start these workshops, these warrior workshops, to help people remember that within themselves, so that they can get through their own adversities and really lead the lives that they were born to lead, and find joy and happiness and purpose and all these things we want, but we can't seem to obtain. So yeah, I started these workshops, and the funny, I mean, universe works in mysterious ways, as we all know. But what the universe will do is they'll present situations that test us, right? To show us, okay, we see you, we hear you, we know what you're doing, but can you walk your talk? Let's see, can you graduate from this lesson? And so when I started these warrior workshops, I had a really traumatic experience happen, where a man broke into my house in the middle of the night and held me at gunpoint in my bedroom while my two young boys were asleep in their beds. And he abducted me. And he took me to the bank, took all my money, and I eventually was let go. But what that, I mean, the lessons in that, I'm going to say the gifts of that experience. And while I know it's hard to understand how any type of a traumatic experience like that can be a gift, and I'm not saying that I would wish it upon anybody, nor would I want to experience it again. But what it showed me was the vital importance of being that warrior, not just physically, because while I am a trained violence prevention and self-defense instructor, I didn't have to get physical. I could have, but the vital importance of training that warrior mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, so that if or when anything adverse happens, we're able to calm ourselves, we're able to be in the moment, we're able to trust our intuition more, and essentially trust ourselves and save ourselves in whatever capacity we need to. So it's really this circular, holistic approach to being that warrior. And then even the after effects, right? Because after you're going through shock, and you need to be able to have the resources, or the ability, or the willingness to, you know, face all of that, and to want to let it go, so you don't claim that victim identity for the rest of your life.
How did you get through that night?
How did I get through that night? It was, I was very calm instantaneously. I mean, of course I screamed because right away, but then as soon as I realized what was happening, I instantaneously just came down. And my number one goal was, he needs to get out of the house. I need to get him away from my children. So I was just, you know, in these situations, it's not a one size fits all. My way isn't going to be the way for everybody. And I always say this to people: whatever you do is the right way. Whatever you need to do for you to save yourself is the right way. So for me, it was calm. It was listening. I wanted to know, because I didn't know what he wanted, right? I didn't know why he was here. I needed to understand and be aware of what was happening before I could
someone you knew?
make a decision. No, no. And he hasn't been caught to my knowledge. So he told me, do as I say, nobody will get hurt. So of course I did that. So he guided me down the stairs. And the interesting thing, also another valuable lesson in this experience, is he left, it was right after Christmas, so in December, he left his shoes at the front door. And so that's a lesson in the fact that we all have this moral compass, whether it's wounded or like this guy, while he was doing an atrocious thing, has some type of morality, right? So it's like, if we can kind of tap into that, it helps us come back to the humanity of all of us. And so he put on his shoes and he said, we were going to get in the car. And I remember offering or saying, can I give you my keys and take my keys and whatever. He said, no. Okay. So we get in the car, and then he sits behind me with, gun pointing to my head and directs me and tells me we're going to go to the bank. And I'm calm because, again, I don't know where it's going to go. There was no reason right now for me to fear my life per se. He didn't say, I'm going to kill you. He didn't physically touch me. So I'm lucky in that regard. And he did not threaten my children. So after I take out the money, he actually leaves me $20 in my account. Again, there's some ground for morality. And then after that, he directs me. And I remember thinking, as we're driving away from the bank drive-through, because you don't know where you're going, right? So if he takes me back home or directs me to my house, this guy's not coming back in my house. So I knew that this guy was not going to make it back in my house, and I would do whatever I needed to do to stop that. But as chance would have it, he directed me closer to my house, but not to my house, told me to pull over, and then he got out of the car and walked away. And I do remember thinking, maybe I can, actually it's always in hindsight, you're like, I wish I'd done X, Y, Z, but I'm really grateful for the way I reacted. But I do remember being in the car, and he had asked me before he left to look at my wallet and give him anything else I had. And I didn't have anything in my wallet. I had a check. And I do remember, and it's hard for people to understand or believe me when I say this, feeling compassion in that very moment of extreme trauma.
You felt compassion for him.
I felt compassion for him, not because, again, I'm not excusing what he's doing, because this guy needs to obviously have consequences and he needs help. But the fact that here's this man who's doing what he's doing to a single mother after Christmas, what kind of a life does that guy live? What is his story? What are his traumas that are not healed or resolved? What kind of it just made me feel really sad for him. And I'm pretty convinced that was a large reason as to why I was able to do what I did and get out relatively unharmed as I did. So.
And this resilience that you showed that night, and that you have in life, you think comes from your shamanism, from your inner warrior, from
Absolutely.
finding your authentic self.
Had I not been on that, had I not already been starting to heal and resolve all of the things I didn't know were infecting me, probably would have, who knows? I probably would have reacted a little bit more in a different way, we'll say.
You wrote to me that going from false self to authentic self is a warrior's journey, everyone's journey. Can you explain it to me? What do you mean by false self to authentic self?
Well, false self is really that conditioning that we experience early, especially early on in life, right? Those adverse experiences that we all have adversity. We've all experienced trauma in different forms. Our mind doesn't understand the difference between what's real and what's not real, right? And so we start to, again, kind of come away from that truth of who we really are. That root of when we're all born with love. We're all born with compassion. We're all born with forgiveness. But then life starts to shape us, and our experience shape us and kind of create that false identity. And so this shamanism, or this warrior's journey back to the authenticity of yourself, it's really coming back to that root, that inner compass of who you are, and that it is that warrior spirit that's going to,
there's so many people that talk about authentic self and journey and finding out who you really are and stuff like that. How do you do that? How do you do that? Do you just like sit around? Do you meditate? Like, what do you do to find out who you really are, who your authentic self is?
I mean, what works for one person might not work for somebody else. So it's really, again, it's a resolving of the past, because if you resolve all of those, so for example, when I work with people, whether it's in groups and workshops or one-on-one, I say, okay, well, who do you not want to be? What parts of yourself do you not like? And people are so quick to list. I don't like this. I don't want to be this way. I hate when I do this. I wish I was this, et cetera, et cetera. Great. Now we have a baseline. Now we can turn that over, and now we can figure out who you want to be. Let's set that compass dial of, okay, well, you don't want to be insecure. So that means you want to be confident, right? You don't want to be overweight. That means you want to be in shape, or whatever it is for you. You don't want to be jealous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is this unpacking of all the reasons why you are those things. And that's the false self. And when you can unpack and resolve them, then it's like this, the phoenix rising. Yes, everybody talks about it because it's this glorious idea, but to actually walk the talk and do it, it's hard. It's hard.
We're chatting tonight with Beth Sturdevant. She's a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and aspiring entrepreneur. We're going to take a break for a final message and come back with our conclusion in about 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a really interesting conversation tonight with Beth Sturdevant. She's a spiritual healer, a quantum shamanic master, a Reiki practitioner, a mindfulness educator, a podcaster, and an aspiring entrepreneur. And she's told us a little bit about her challenges, her trauma, her journey, how she found her authentic self, some unbelievable experiences, bad experiences that have happened to her, how she's found resilience. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about strength and resilience, and how critically important it is in life.
I mean, well, strength and resilience, again, if we're everybody has a story, right? Everybody has a journey in life, and everybody's going to experience adversity in whatever ways they experience it. We're not comparing one trauma to another, because each individual story and experience through adversity is unique and matters, right, to that individual person. So what my mountain is compared to your mountain might be different, but it doesn't make it more or less insignificant. You still need that inner strength to keep going. You need that resiliency to know that you can. And then you also need to know that you need to take moments, not just, it's not this constant, you're not fighting constantly all the time. You also need moments of processing and integrating, right? So it's this fine balance of the two. And so in my podcast, the Warrior Spirit podcast, I speak with people about that warrior's journey through adversity. What is your story? How did you get through it? What did you do? And most importantly, what did you learn that's making your life and the lives of others better? Because that's the full circle, right? It's not just what you experience, really, there's no one unique story. It's all that one, the hero's journey. It's the same story over and over and over again. Essentially, it's what you come out with it and what you do with it that matters most. And so that inner strength, that resiliency, that authenticity is essential to help people get through that within themselves and in their own lives.
If people wanted to do a session with you, what's the cost of that?
The cost for one session is $150. People can come, sometimes people will come for one session, but I do recommend at least a minimum of 3 so that we can start to tackle at least one main issue and start to really kind of dive a little bit deeper into.
And if people want to access your services? How do they do that? Have you got a website?
I do, bethsturdevant.com. I'm also on Facebook as the Warrior Spirit Healer, as well as Instagram as Warrior Spirit Healer.
And these workshops that you run through the same website, or do you have a separate website?
You can access them through the website. The workshops I do, actually, I do mindfulness workshops for the Canadian Armed Forces, privately, we'll say, for some units of the Canadian Armed Forces with my partner. We have a website, warriorcompass.ca. But we do workshops for other organizations as well. And there's a lot of amazing projects that are coming up. So if people want to stay tuned and up to date, then I would highly recommend subscribing to my newsletter on my website.
And you said that you're planning on opening up a big wellness center.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in 2016, while in meditation and kind of doing my woo-woo thing, I had a vision of this place, we'll call it land, center of strength and resiliency, where people can come back and remember who they are, remember that inner warrior spirit that they have, whether, again, it's been wounded or they didn't even know it was there to begin with. And so at the time, full-time single mom, I didn't understand how I was going to get there. But through the years of doing workshops here and there and kind of testing out okay, do people want this? How does it affect people? I, opened up a company, Warriors of the Light Incorporated, where we did just that. We mixed the warrior arts training with meditation and the mindfulness, and the results were astronomical, but that closed during the pandemic for a variety of reasons. But the vision it's always been there. It's always been there. And so it's really starting to come together in a pretty magical way with a group of really amazing people.
Beth Sturdevant, thank you so much for joining us and for inspiring us. And I guess if I could add my 2 cents, I think that maybe not everyone, but I think close to everyone does have this trauma, has got some challenges in life. And sometimes just talking about it, just, as you say, sort of revisits it, relives it, and doesn't allow you to get over it and get on with life. And so therefore doing something along the lines of what you're talking about. And I love your idea of the inner warrior spirit, and that we've got to refine that. I probably suffered from ADHD when I was a teenager before it was really diagnosed, and maybe that was something that you suffered from. And I had a phys ed teacher who realized that I just needed to exercise, and I was a good runner, and he got me out running. And I found that after I ran, and my father did the same thing, he made me run around the block when I was irritable or irritating at dinner. After I had a little of exercise, I could sit down and focus. And so, I was a good student, but it took exercise to make me a good student. And if I didn't have that exercise, and lots of people have talked about how some schools today are very uncomfortable for athletic guys because they need that exercise and are more, sit down and be quiet. And for me, sitting down and being quiet was not something I did very well. And therefore I got into running, I got into football, I got into rugby. I needed to hit people. Now that was maybe my inner warrior spirit. Then I became a camp out tripper, and I loved, portaging canoes and building fires and living on the outdoors. And I never got into archery. I did some archery, but not like you were talking about, and didn't get into hunting. But there was something about being outdoors and looking at water and camping that really spoke to me and still speaks to me today. Is that my inner warrior spirit? Who knows? But the idea that you talk about, that you've got to find that inner warrior spirit as a way of finding who your authentic self is and building that resilience. And one thing I do know is we all go through crap. And this last 2 years with COVID, and then, truckers convoy, and now a war in Ukraine, we've gone through a lot, and we're not out of it yet. And so building up that resilience and at the same time, compassion for others is so critically important. So Beth, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your journey, and more importantly than your journey, how you saved yourself, found yourself, built back your resilience. It's been inspiring. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate being here.
Well, that's our show for tonight, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Ottawa or the Algonquin territory at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube. And my podcasts are on Audible, Apple, Speakeasy, and SoundCloud. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Really appreciate it. Good night.